Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Bleav in Texans. I am one part Ruben Calvillo, joined by the handsome man as ever, Harley Dugan. And we have our guy, Mark Bergin, Bleav in Steelers. Welcome to Bleav in Texans. How's it going?
Fellas, thanks for having me. And Harley, I love the floral shirt. It's looking fantastic. Week 4, Steelers, Texans. But I'll tell both of you this, having been to Houston, Texas once in my life. Lots going to be made of this matchup. Rookie quarterback, kind of the two AFC teams stack up. J.J. Watt getting inducted into the Texans Ring of Honor, all of that. The fajitas at El Tiempo in Houston, Texas are among the best I've had in my life. El Tiempo fajitas.
Bro.
I'm
no way
you.
you brought that up. My best friend, my roommate, Naomi, El Tiempo is her spot, right? She gets the picture margaritas. She gets the fajitas.
She's
and
doing
it's
it right.
wrapped. Shout out to El Tiempo, man.
I just had to throw that in there. I'm not even kidding you. Anyone who visits Houston, I'm like, go to one of the locations and you'll have a fantastic meal.
No, man. Excited, for you to be joining us. Saw on Twitter a picture of Hobby Lobby Airport flooded with the steel curtain. You guys travel well.
Absolutely. And there's Steelers fans all over the country. And it was funny, too, even in Vegas last weekend, where a lot of Steelers fans will say, hey, I'll make this my vacation, go to the city of sin, gamble a bit on the weekend, and I'll just happen to go to the game. But it's funny with newer fan bases. I see this a lot with the Chargers, too. With Steelers fans all over the country, and a lot of times they can make an away stadium like a home field advantage. And I thought that was evident during the Sunday night game against the Raiders this past weekend. Saw a lot of terrible towels in the crowd.
I hate those terrible towels, man.
Come on now.
I can't stand it.
I just can't stand it, right? It's like not only do you have to deal with the loud-ass crowd, but then you have to see the flags, the flags just flying in the air. You don't know what to do. But Harley, week 4 is here. You know why this game is important at H-Town. J.J. Watt returning. How do you feel it?
We are always hyped when it comes to anything JJ. The city of Houston gets turned up another notch. It was electric inside stadium for NRG, Reliance Stadium, when it was beforehand. I mean, we're hyped, man. This game means a lot to us. When you look at it as a 4-week increment, and I know you have that extra game. You look at this in 4-week increments. You could look at it like, hey, we could go 2-2 potentially in 4 weeks with everything we've been thrown at as a franchise with this offensive line, and it's going to get worse Sunday against the Steelers. Yeah, we're definitely hyped for this game.
I love it. I'll say this. The last 2 times these two teams played in Houston, you had the DeAndre Hopkins going to do some butterflies in the end zone, and the Steelers were up big, and our guy Vince Williams decided to post up right next to him and do that. So if we could recreate that somehow on Sunday, I think we'd have some magic, fellas.
Man, that was a hard thing to watch because y'all were beating our ass, and it was like close to the holidays. And, it's like DeAndre, he gave me some points in fantasy. I'm like, oh, this is a good little present. And a Steeler just gets there, and you see how instantly get mad. No,
Well, by all accounts, too, Williams was one of the toughest players on the team at the time, too. So it was cool to see that. But you guys have a rookie quarterback that you should be very, very excited about. And it's like through 3 games, he hasn't thrown a pick. If you want to go on the other side of the ball, too, Anderson off the edge, he might not have the sack totals, but he's already getting double teamed. I think there's only 2 other players who have had more double teams against them. So he's already wreaking havoc up front. So, yeah, they're rookies, but they're going to take the identity set by DeMeco Ryans, your first-year head coach. For me, you guys are playing with house money in this game because for this to be even a 3-point game, if you can even compete with the Steelers, that to me is almost like a win. And you see what they do to the Jags in week 3, and it's like, look, most Steelers fans, when they saw this game on the schedule, oh, yeah, it's a win. This is not going to be a give-me game. It won't be. It won't be. So it's like, you're playing with house money with a rookie quarterback and a first-year head coach. And I like what I've seen from Stroud thus far. And even if you say, oh, well, the 1-2 record, AFC South Division, we're not where we need to be. Look at the other rookie quarterbacks right now, right? Bryce Young made it through 2 games before he's supposedly hurt. Now, apparently he'll be back from an ankle injury. I personally think that the Panthers just didn't want to play him up in Seattle. Richardson's already out too with the Colts. So it's like, you might have best of the bunch. I know it's a 3-game sample size, but like, you guys should be really, really excited in Houston for the first time in some time, because if Stroud can stay healthy, you can get some weapons around him in future seasons. I know the Texans can't run the ball right now, but Stroud has looked good so far with what the Texans have around him. And when this team takes on the identity of DeMeco Ryans, there's a reason why Robert Saleh, who was the former 49ers defensive coordinator before Ryans became a head coach, I think they're going to take on the identity of their head coach. And okay, what had the 49ers done defensively for, I don't know, the past 5 seasons? Heat-seeking missiles defensively. You see those boys flying around at every level of their team. You guys are playing with house money right now. Again, first-year head coach, rookie quarterback. And it's week 4 right now too. This team's only going to get better and better in the coming weeks.
Well, we're feeling dangerous. You know, not only has he not thrown.
Now we're going Baker Mayfield on me.
Not only has he not thrown an
Didn't
interception,
think of that.
but he has the 3rd most passing yards in his first 3 starts, behind Cam Newton, Justin Herbert, right in front of Patrick Mahomes. CJ Stroud is the reason why we believe we have a chance against you guys. Now, the key matchup is your front 7 against our banged up offensive line. And I have to ask you, man, how is it like having number 90 just wreak havoc for you? 2 sacks last week, 3 quarterback hits, 2 tackles for loss. You know, if I'm TJ Watt right now, I'm licking my chops looking at this offensive line.
Yes, and named the AFC's Defensive Player of the Month for the month of September. Now also the franchise's all-time leading player when it comes to sacks. And think about how many great defensive players the Steelers have had through their history. So with Watt, he's going to line up over an opposing team's right tackle. And the reason for that is most quarterbacks in the NFL are right-handed. So if he can get in the face of opposing quarterbacks consistently, tipping passes at the line of scrimmage, forcing fumbles at the line of scrimmage, get sacks, the tackles for loss, a do-it-all player. And if you want to chip him, if you want to double team him, triple team him, he still finds a way to make plays, period. And so I love Micah Parsons, the Bosa brothers, Myles Garrett in Cleveland's awfully good. But like, to me in Pittsburgh, TJ Watt is maybe not even just the best edge rusher, but the best defensive player in all of football. And we saw last year when he was hurt with a torn pectoral, what the Steelers defense is with him versus what they are without him. It all starts with him up front. He causes pressure off the edge. He makes the defensive backfield, their lives a lot easier. And if you want to double and triple team him with the attention that he garners, other players like Alex Highsmith off the other edge going up against the left tackle, he's going to get one-on-one matchups, which he's going to win more often than not, coming off a season where he had like 14 and a half sacks. So TJ Watt is a special, special player. And if he can stay healthy, we see JJ's headed for Canton. He might very well even be better than his brother, because let me throw a few stats out for you.
Oh, you're about to hurt Harley's feelings.
Hey. When TJ Watt tied Michael Strahan's single season sack record, he did so in 15 games. He didn't even play in all 17 games. He also led the league in tackles for a loss that season. And there were 4 games out of the 15 where he played 50% or fewer of his team's defensive snaps. So if you give TJ Watt a 17-game sample size, I know he's on pace to break the record right now. I don't know if he'll keep pace. But this is a player off the edge. Like, I think the Steelers not only have him line up against right tackles because most quarterbacks are right-handed. Your best offensive linemen tend to be left tackles, centers and left tackles, generally speaking. he's able to take advantage time and time and time again, regardless of who you want to line up across from him at the right tackle position. It's just the truth.
Yeah, and before I let Harley go off, the Houston Texans' potential starting offensive line will be Austin Decklius at left tackle, Kendrick Green at left guard, rookie Jared Patterson at center, veteran Shaq Mason right guard, George Fant at right tackle. Now, here's the thing. Austin Decklius, LSU 4-year starter. Do you move him to right tackle but leave him at the mercy of TJ Watt? I don't know, but it's not looking good. And Orlando says our O-line played well last game. To be honest, I have faith in them. Look, I do too, but you rarely get good back-to-back games from a bad offensive line. Harley, there you go.
Man, let's get to the offensive line real quick before I talk about JJ. I mean, the O-line it was already bad. We already knew it was going to be bad going into this game. And then somebody must have said, it can't get any worse. And here comes Austin Decklius. And for Steelers fans that don't know who Austin Decklius is, Texans fans know him very well. I mean, he's just not good. It's just to put it quite simply. He's the butt of a joke when it comes to a local radio. Like, it's just not good, to put it simply. We saw him in training camp. He was there and just didn't look good. And this was against Will Anderson and Jonathan Grenard and whoever else was in the mix. Jacob Martin beat him like a drum a few times. And now Martin's with the Colts, so he's just not good, to put it quite simply. And to put him against TJ, that would not be smart. I think George Fant has actually played well at right tackle. Now, you need to have him a legacy game against TJ Watt. But, I'm so happy to hear you talk about TJ Watt. I was a huge fan of his. Obviously, because of JJ, I just thought he was a special player coming out of Wisconsin. I remember the draft, and it's like, man, he's still falling. And then and my dad's there, we're watching the draft, and we're like, God damn it, the Steelers come up in a few. Like, Steelers and Ravens just seem like they know exactly who they're picking, and you don't want that certain player to fall to them, and it's just happening because it's destiny. Like, it's just how it feels like whenever it comes to both organizations. But JJ Watt, I'm going to stick up for my guy JJ, because JJ, to me, and Ruben's heard me say this before, and Mark, Ruben has a wild reaction every time I say it. Mark, you're about to get this reaction too.
I'm ready.
JJ Watt, to me, is the best player to ever play in the league.
No.
I know. I get it all the time. And
Lawrence Taylor, Reggie White,
I think
Jerry
he's
Rice.
better than all of them. I really do. I do definitely believe that.
Lawrence Taylor.
Sure,
Lawrence
Taylor created the position. I mean, Deacon Jones created the sack. JJ Watt, before JJ, I don't ever remember looking at Fox on Sunday, CBS on Sunday, or even people coming out with quarterback hurries, pressures, batted passes. JJ Watt was almost at the 20-20-20. What does that mean? 20 batted passes, 20 tackles for losses, 20 sacks. He was so close to doing that, and that was a big milestone for him to do. Batted passes was nothing that was ever talked about with defensive players, from my knowledge, until JJ entered the league. Then all of a sudden, everyone's starting to bat passes. Everyone's starting to affect the defense in the offense, in a different manner. So, you know what? Prime JJ Watt, without the injuries, to me, is the best player to ever play in the league. I would say. And sure, I mean, now when I take my goggles and bias off, yeah, obviously, there's Lawrence Taylor, there's a bunch of other people, but I'm keeping the goggles on, and specifically against TJ Watt. No, JJ Watt is the best player in the league.
Here's where we'll agree, is that he is a first ballot Hall of Famer. I'll agree with you there. He'll go in first ballot, no question in my mind. And to me, you can also point to, his on the field excellence. And I do want to talk some about turnover creation with him some, but what he did in the aftermath of Hurricane Harvey is what all athletes should aspire for, in all seriousness. to help raise the money that he did from when his community needed him to be synonymous with the community, that to me, it epitomizes of what any athlete should aspire to be like. And that to me, despite his prolific ability on the field, off the field to me, where it's like, he'll always be a special player. And it's like, you can never have enough Watt brothers on your team. The Steelers had TJ and Derek for several years. And then there were rumors when JJ was leaving Houston. Could he join TJ Watt? And I'll say this, I would have loved to seen the Watt brothers line up opposite one another and said, hey, brother, I'm going to race you to the quarterback.
Bro, that would have been nasty. He had 12 sacks last year with the Arizona Cardinals. Just imagine them just meeting out the quarterback, dude. That is insane. Switching to the Steelers offense.
You didn't want to talk more about Kendrick Green, former Steelers legend?
You know what? There you go. So when we traded for him, the main thing was the Steelers gave up on him and moved him to fullback. And he
didn't make any sense.
Like we were just like, what are we going on? Now he's starting games for us at left guard.
Yeah, he was initially a guard coming out of Illinois, and he just didn't work with the Steelers. I do credit Omar Khan for saying, let me get a pick back. So thank you for that with that trade, because he just wasn't going to play on this roster because the Steelers bring in Isaiah Seumalo out of Philly and Broderick Jones to help try to fortify the offensive line. Jones has started to play a little bit. He's not starting quite yet against another talented edge rusher in Anderson this weekend. You had Max Crosby in week 3, Myles Garrett in week 2, and one of the Bosa brothers in week 1, which has been a gauntlet in and out of itself. But Green, when he started to get used in training camp as a fullback, it's like, is this something the Steelers are actually trying to do, or is it a gimmick? Now, I credit Kendrick Green to say, hey, I want to try to help improve my team in any way possible. And he gets another opportunity in Houston now. But I listen to a lot of times what players say. And when Ben Roethlisberger goes on his podcast and says, hey, my center in my final year of my career didn't suit up for a single game in the 2022 season. So he was Roethlisberger's starting center in 2021. He was not on the active roster, Kendrick Green, for a single game in 2022. It just kind of shows what his struggles have been. It's nothing personal against him, but the tape time and time again in Pittsburgh was that he wasn't getting it done. He goes back to his natural position at guard. Maybe he's better suited at guard than center. We'll see. And again, he'll have his opportunity in Houston. What I'm curious to see is Sunday, is that a matchup the Steelers exploit, or is it a revenge game for Green saying against my former team of saying, hey, you gave up on me too fast, too soon? That's a matchup I'm going to watch too, because Cam Hayward's out for the Steelers with the groin injury. So you've got 2 young players up front in DeMarvin Leal, second-year player out of Texas A&M, and then Keanu Benton, a rookie out of Wisconsin.
Had a sack last week against the Raiders. Just, we were talking about him as someone, the Houston Texans to the drafts, just clogs up the run, then so strong he ended up getting to the QB. I'll stick with the Steelers defense. The secondary, I feel like that is one thing the Houston Texans could take advantage of. Last week, almost $150 or a little bit more to Devontae Adams, 88 yards to Jacoby Myers, Minkah Fitzpatrick leading the pack. How is your secondary doing right now in terms of like being healthy? I know they have old man Pat Peterson back there. I think he had INT last week.
A few glitches.
Better in week 3 than it was in the first 2 weeks of the season. Levi Wallace had a really tough first 2 weeks. The corner opposite Patrick Peterson, he had 2 interceptions in the Sunday night game against the Raiders. So he looked a lot better. That was coming off a game in the Monday night game where Amari Cooper got the better of him. And then Jerome Ford had a long run where backside run support, you lose contain, you lose the game. And it's just sound gap responsibility. And he lost that. So he took a lot of criticism, rightfully so, but he looked a lot better in week 3. Patrick Peterson, I mean, there's a reason why he was an all-pro for several years. If he could pass down that wisdom and knowledge of what he knows as an all-pro player in this league to a rookie, Joey Porter Jr., who's getting more snaps week in and week out. He's increasingly had more snaps. you don't want to put any rookie right from the frying pan right into the fire. But the Steelers, their 2 top picks were Broderick Jones at left tackle. Hopefully he can protect Kenny Pickett's blind side for the next decade. But then Joey Porter Jr. at 32. Cornerback was a position with the Steelers that wasn't good enough last year, period. And if you don't believe me, go pop on the Steelers-Eagles tape when A.J. Brown absolutely ate us alive a year ago. And in 2023 and beyond, with such an emphasis on the quarterback and the passing game, you have to have sound cornerbacks that can hold their own against some of the top receivers in the league.
Yeah, we go back to Joey Porter Jr. I mean, does this feel like conversation is deja vu? I just said defensive players, for some reason, there's a destiny for guys to fall within the Steelers and the Ravens organization. And I'm here looking at the draft going, there's nothing wrong with Joey Porter Jr. Like, what is going on here? What is this injury stuff going on? Like, this guy is just fine. And then I'm looking at, wonder who'll take him. And then and I'm like, man, he fell to the second round. Oh, this is ridiculous. The Steelers are going to take him. His dad's on the damn staff. I mean, this is a match made in heaven for the family son, to come on in. That's fantastic. But, we're talking about the secondary for y'all. Let's highlight some of our receivers, though. These guys that in training camp for the Houston Texans, these weren't household names whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, we feel a lot better with them because of the quarterback we have in C.J. Stroud and, how he's highlighted Nico Collins from his first 2 weeks, not so much last week. But C.J. spreads the ball so much is what we've noticed.
Yep.
Whether it's Nico Collins, whether it's Robert Woods when you need something in a pinch. Tank Dell had a fantastic game last week against the Jaguars. So, besides them 3, you had Brevin Jordan resurgence all of a sudden last week. There's other guys that are all of a sudden now and are like, oh, okay, guys that we thought were dead in the water like Brevin Jordan and thought he was going to get cut. Boom, he finds his way in the red zone last week. So, I'm wondering the overall matchup with our wide receivers. Who's holding down Tank Dell?
Yeah, I think the word you use that sticks out to me is spreading the ball around, because when I'm just looking at box scores and numbers, it's like there's no clear-cut leader. But again, you look at Stroud's production and then the turnovers, which is going to be the big thing. If the Steelers can get pressure up front with a banged-up Texans offensive line, that creates opportunities on the back end. Now, what I will say, too, Patrick Peterson's almost playing a little bit more on the left side. They move him around a little bit, but on the left side, a lot like how they use Joe Hayden in the final years of his career, because Patrick Peterson's not, spry like he was several years ago in the prime of his career. He's on the back half of his career right now, probably the last few years. So Mike Tomlin, before he was the Steelers head coach, was the Vikings defensive coordinator for a year, and then he comes from the Tampa 2 system as a defensive backs coach for the Bucs back in the day. Steelers are playing a lot of zone coverage, and so, okay, why does all of this matter? When they brought in Patrick Peterson, coming off a year where he had 6 interceptions, Vikings played a lot of zone defense a year ago. And Peterson can play both man and zone, but he's not quite as quick as he used to be. And so the Steelers are playing, you'll notice they do play quite a bit of zone coverage, a lot of cover 2 coverage as well. It's not the straight up man-to-man that you see, and that's in Mike Tomlin's image. And what I mean by that is when you think Steelers football, you think of the 3-4 defense and the Dick LeBeau and the great defenses. It's a little bit of a different style than what it is under Mike Tomlin, Terrell Austin, his defensive coordinator now. It's kind of more in Tomlin's image. And with that, if you don't have the corners to play straight man all the time, and it's not that the Steelers don't ever play man, they have played more zone defense and particularly cover 2, really in the last 2 seasons, more so than I've seen in previous seasons of Steelers football. Part of that's personnel, part of that's more of Mike Tomlin's defense.
No, man, that's the one thing we are hoping the Houston Texans could take advantage of is that secondary. If we are able to throw the ball, because that front seven is going to be firing on all cylinders. But switching to the Pittsburgh Steelers offense, Kenny Pickett, Now, I'm still not going to give up on Kenny Pickett just yet. I have about 3 of his rookie cards. I need him to, show out for me
Mm-hmm.
a little bit, but right now has not been playing good. Last week against the Raiders looked decent. 2 tutties, no interception. But against this Houston Texans, D'Amico Ryans led defense, I feel like we can make some havoc for Kenny Pickett. We got Will Anderson Jr., hopefully a statement game in front of J.J. Watt. Harley mentioned all the time that he is second in pass rush win rate behind Micah Parsons. To me, before I give it to Harley, I think the partner in crime, Jonathan Grenard, I think he needs to rise to the occasion in terms of helping get to the quarterback. But Kenny Pickett, I'm not worried about.
Got some thunder now. No, Kenny Pickett, thunder. Maybe a sign of things to come. Who knows? No, I'm not sold on. I'm not sold on Kenny Pickett. I got to see more. I haven't seen a lot from. I mean, we haven't seen a lot from him in regard. So, but I don't know. From what I see, the games I see, especially, and it's tough to like just go off recency bias. We just saw him Sunday Night Football, right?
Yeah.
And so, I mean, from the little I've seen, I haven't seen anything that goes, oh, there we go. Like there's always something you see with each quarterback. It just seems like you can't even explain it to some point. But there's always like, oh, that's a franchise quarterback. And with Kenny Pickett, I don't know. I just don't see anything that keeps me attached to him quarterback wise. I just don't see a lot. But I mean, this is more so credit to the Steelers than anything. The talk around y'all's offense is fire Matt Canada, fire Matt Canada, fire Matt Canada. Mm-hmm. And yet this is the Steelers, right? This is Mike Tomlin and the Steelers. And throughout all that muck, they're still doing their thing. They're still, sure, you might punch us in the mouth, but buddy, we're going to keep fighting. We're going to keep standing. We're going to punch you straight back in the mouth, if not landed 2-3 times more. This is just Steelers football. It's a little different, but the forte and the mindset has been always the same. So yeah, sure, sub-level, average quarterback play, it don't matter. It's Mike Tomlin and the Steelers. They're going to come in here and give you everything you got. So you got to be ready as a Texan.
Shout out to Harley on his engagement. Once again,
thank you.
Got engaged about a week and a half ago.
Congrats, man.
Appreciate it.
We got Bleav in Steelers here, man. Shout out. This is, why Bleav is so special, where we're able to talk to opposing NFL teams. But Mark, how do you feel about Kenny Pickett so far?
The Spider-Man meme where there's 2 Spider-Mans just pointing at each other?
Yeah.
It's been the Steelers offense, whether it's Canada's play calling, his predictability, the offensive line being poor quarterback play, bad wide receiver play, running backs not doing what they're supposed to do. Like, it's just like everyone needs to be accountable. Now, I'll lay some facts up for you fellas. Matt Canada became the Steelers offensive coordinator in 2021, took over for Randy Fichtner, whose contract expired. They say, let's promote Canada, the quarterback's coach. Since he became the coordinator in 2021, the Steelers do not have a game where they have 400 yards of offense. Every single other NFL team has at least 3. So the offense isn't working, and it's like it was better on Sunday night. They finally got the play action going. They finally targeted Pat Freiermuth. Tight ends are a position of strength, in my opinion, with the Steelers. Run more 12 personnel. Set up your play action where Kenny Pickett went 6 of 8 in week 3. You do have to establish the running game somewhat to do that. But when it's like the sum's not equaling the parts with this offense, and I would argue that you have talent at each level, running backs, tight ends, wide receivers, players that have had success in this league. But the baseline has to be where you ended the 2022 season. And in weeks 1 and 2, where they only score 7 points against the 49ers, albeit a very good defense. And then week 2 against the Browns, you say, well, they win on Monday night. And, look at the scoreboard. Well, no. The offense only scored 12 points in that game. It was the defense and the heroics of Alex Highsmith in that game that led to 2 Steelers defensive touchdowns, and you escape a Monday night game that you probably shouldn't have won, because if you're scoring 7 points and 12 points on offense in this league with how football's played now, you're not going to win very many games. And so Kenny Pickett's development's tied to his offensive coordinator, and it's like, okay, if Canada struggles yet again and this offense is dormant, they'll just let his contract expire at the end of the year, Matt Canada, and he'll be your scapegoat. But it's got to be better now if you want to go and make a run and say, hey, the Steelers are a year early with their second-year quarterback, and the clock's ticking because this defense is in good form, probably towards the end of its dominance, just looking at how the roster's configured. And you also have Pickett on a rookie contract in his second year. If he's worth his salt, he will quickly outperform that rookie contract. We've seen that time and time and time again. The saving grace with Canada and the glass half full perspective would be Pickett advocated for him to stay in the offseason. And then how do you stunt the development of a young quarterback? It's rip off a Band-Aid and treat it with the Band-Aid instead of treating the flesh wound of when young quarterbacks struggle in this league. It's just, new offensive coordinator, new coaching, and repeat. That's the idea of keeping Matt Canada. But the predictability, like, fellas, when we're watching on TV and we can predict what the Steelers are going to do, what do you think opposing head coaches, scouts, coordinators are looking at when they have a full week to scout this team? And that's been the frustration with this offense.
I could feel that frustration through here. I can feel it, man.
We've been there.
It's real.
We have been there many times. So I'm glad we're having some optimism now as Texans fans, because goodness gracious, we know what bad offensive coordinators are, and we know that very much too well here recently with the Texans, man. I wanted to ask you this though. You mentioned a lot of zone with the Pittsburgh Steelers, and you know more details on it than I do, because I hear zone. Jags played zone against CJ Stroud last week, heavy, and Stroud diced them up. Now, obviously, the defense is different from the Jags and the Steelers. Players-wise, everything else, schematic, I'm sure as well. Terrell Austin has done an amazing job in his time there taking over. So, but I do want to know, you're saying zone defense. What are we talking with zone defense? Is it still an attacking zone, heavy zone blitz is what I'm assuming? But, can you get into some of the details around that?
Sure. I really think, to not get too nitty gritty with X's and O's, what I would say is this game's going to be controlled. It's a cliche, but one at the line of scrimmage. So what do I mean by that? The reason why the Steelers looked much better in week 3 compared to the first 2 weeks is, and it's not flashy at all, they actually won time of possession. They held Josh Jacobs, the NFL's leading rusher from a year ago. The Raiders only had 69 yards total as a team. Steelers had 105 yards rushing, and they won time of possession. I look at the week 1 game where the 49ers have the ball for almost 38 minutes. So your defense is out on the field almost twice as long as your offense. That's going to be the key to me because, again, just looking at the stats, I haven't watched as much Texans football as either of you two have, but the Texans haven't been able to run the ball. And if they make Stroud one-dimensional in this game, as impressive as he's looked in 3 weeks, that's how this team's able to have success of, okay, what are the Steelers' strengths? Edge rushing is definitely one of them, and it's a position of depth. You have to know where Minkah Fitzpatrick is. Now, if I'm the Texans, I'm going to try to get my running game going. How do I do that? You got to attack the middle. So what's different this year with the Steelers' defense compared to previous years? The Steelers completely revamped their inside linebackers. They run a 3-4 defense. And so gone are Miles Jack and Devin Bush, and you bring in a Landon Roberts, Cole Holcomb, and Quan Alexander. Those 3 players get into the mix for the Steelers at the inside linebacker position. How you attack them is up the middle, especially considering Cam Hayward is out. And don't forget, Brian Flores, who is your linebackers coach from a year ago and really helped shore up the running game, he's now the DC over in Minnesota. So that's, to me, how I would attack this team. I looked at what Nick Chubb was doing in that Monday night game in week 2 before he got hurt. I'm of the opinion if he hadn't gotten hurt, the Browns go on and win that game. And so the Steelers 2 years ago in the 2021 season, they led the league in sacks, but ranked dead last in rushing yards allowed. I don't know if I've ever seen that in NFL history before. They have a bend but don't break mentality, but it's attacking them up the middle to where you've had success in the front 7. I also think it's a little bit of a byproduct of playing in the AFC North Division because mentioned Chubb and the Browns running game. The Browns always have a good offensive line. Then Lamar Jackson, too, is pretty prolific with the ball in his hands, too. And the Ravens always have a formidable running game as well. So your division opponents, it's 4 games right there where you're going to have to stop a strong rushing attack. If I were the Texans, that's what I would try to do, is establish the ground game early, and it helps keep your defense off the field. And then playing mistake-free football, which is what Stroud's been able to do through 3 weeks. I will be very impressed if he doesn't have a turnover through 4 weeks after going up against this Steelers defense. I'm just going to be honest with you, too.
If he doesn't throw a turnover, I'm going to say this dude is just ready to take over the league. And well, the first week against the Ravens, where we're saying, oh, very good game from CJ Stroud. We got to see it against the Colts. Almost those for 400. Then does this against the Jaguars. This is the one true test. And I feel like the NFL world is watching the Houston Texans right now. Let us know if you are real or not. This is the toughest team we are going to face right now. Maybe the toughest defense, the toughest pass rush we face all year. If CJ Stroud is able to do something without offensive line with 4 starters, your third starter and left tackle, all the vibes are going to be up here in Houston. I think another key thing is somehow trying to stop George Pickens because he's been solid so far to start the year. I think it is 3 games with 70-plus receiving yards. I don't believe he has a touchdown yet. I'm not sure. I could be wrong. But George Pickens, if, no Derek Stingley, Steven Nelson is going to be the matchup on him. He is one person that I can see, really giving the Houston defense some problems. Harley, anyone else that the fans should watch on the Pittsburgh Steelers offense?
Man, there's been a lot of fans talk, and I'm glad you talked about this, Mark. There's been a lot of fans just like, the Steelers got a bad run defense. I'm like, I mean, where are we getting this from?
Sort of is what I would tell you.
Because it just doesn't feel that way. I mean, when someone says Steelers and then the sentence also says bad defense, I immediately say, nope, not that. That's false. That's false. Like, just anywhere in that sentence, if that's constructed out of someone's mouth or tweeted, like, I'm like, ignore. Like, I'm just so I'm glad you did highlight that a little bit. I'm looking at it like, man, y'all played the 49ers, you played the Browns. Yeah. Both teams, the 49ers have the best offensive line in football. I mean, they had a joke around NFL Fox on Sunday. Can an average person run a yard in the NFL? And everyone said no. But then Julian Edelman said, yeah, if you had the 49ers offensive line, so that's what y'all went up against week 1. And that was not pretty. I don't want to, reminisce on that. The Browns, Nick Chubb, offensive line, like you said, I mean, they always have a solid run game when they had Chubb, Hunt, just Nick Chubb now. Jerome Ford still put up good numbers. So, hey, those 2 guys, okay, then you held Josh Jacobs, in my opinion. Hey, we all saw last year, house money on him. He just destroyed and became the leader in rushing yards. I mean, y'all did an amazing job against him. I'm going, oh, okay, so maybe is it just a byproduct of good teams, or I'm not going too crazy, but I will say this: what's the prediction, Mark? We're feeling, as Ruben said, he's Baker Mayfield. We're feeling dangerous, and hopefully that's not tea leaves for a bad performance, but we're feeling really good. And we're excited about CJ Stroud. We have that feeling. I think me and Ruben have shared the feeling on last time's episode on Bleav in Texans that as long as number 7 is suited up, you got a chance. Like, that's what the feeling is starting to become with CJ Stroud. There's not many players you can say that with. And this is only 3 games, and it feels like an overreaction. It definitely does. But I'm slowly starting to set my feet into that mindset. So, you don't have to say win-loss if it's too early for you. But what do you think is the prediction right now for you, Steelers Texans?
Before I go there, can I ask both of you a quick question?
Go for it.
Had the Panthers taken Stroud instead, would you have rather had Bryce Young or Anthony Richardson?
Is it hindsight 2020 or is it back in? Because hindsight 2020, you're going Anthony Richardson. I mean, in which we saw him, what he did with the Colts. Yes, he got injured. Injuries, I think, are going to play a factor, it feels like, in his career. We're starting to see something with this. He had some injuries in Florida, which, that has to be talked about as well. So, but I was a Bryce Young guy. I have no shame in that. I don't care about being wrong. A lot of people,
and there's still a lot of time. And I think it's like, we know what the recipe for both of them will be to have success in this league. And a lot of it is going to be fit, organization, personnel that you can put around them. The reason I asked that was with Young, it really doesn't have a lot to do with Young himself, but it's like the sample size of, he could be Drew Brees, or, he could be another undersized quarterback. And it's like, well, the guys that you're naming are the exceptions, not the norms when it comes to a player of his stature.
I forgot you're from North Carolina, right?
Yeah, and so people here are freaking out. I live in Raleigh, but people here are freaking out about Bryce Young already, and looks like he's going to play in week 4. There are some people that didn't think he was actually injured because he never wore a boot. I don't know about the extent of his ankle injury, but they call it an ankle injury, and he didn't play against Seattle. But on all things considered with Stroud, you have to say, right now, through 3 games, it looks pretty good. Get a bigger sample size. But after 4 games, I talk with Ike about this all the time. And when he played for the Steelers, the way they would evaluate it is, where are we at after the quarter? And then where are we at after the second quarter? And then the third quarter and the fourth quarter. And breaking up what used to be a 16-game regular season, now 17 games by every 4 games, instead of, let's overreact to 1 game. Through 3, though, this kid looks really, really good. And I'll be honest with you, I don't think there's a ton of talent around him right now. Once you get him some help, what that's going to look like could be really, really special. For my prediction, your fans are going to be thrilled to hear this. I have the Steelers winning 24-20. I think it's going to be a close game, but it's not flashy. Time of possession, turnovers, those to me are really going to tell the outcome of this game. I like the Steelers' ability to do that from what I've seen. Hopefully you build off that Sunday night win. But if you regress and go back to what we saw during the first 2 weeks of the season, those calls for Matt Canada's job are just going to get louder and louder and louder and louder. Traditionally, that's not what the Steelers do. They don't typically fire their coaches mid-season, but you've got to see what you got with Kenny Pickett. People can criticize Pickett too. His play hasn't been great at the quarterback position, but coming off a game where he had his first game where he had 2 touchdown passes. And what I would say with Pickett as well as this, you can criticize him and that's fine. Post Ben Roethlisberger, what was the Steelers' best option that would tangibly be better than what the Steelers did in drafting Kenny Pickett with the 20th overall pick a year ago? And I'll be honest with you, I don't think realistically of who you could have either gotten in free agency, a trade, or in last year's draft. Like, Malik Willis is the 3rd stringer now in Tennessee. What were the Steelers supposed to do in that situation? So all things considered, you got to play the hand that you're dealt right now. And we'll see if Pickett is the guy or not. It's a big, big season for him in year 2.
Harley, prediction.
I'm going to say this. I want to say shout out to Mr. John Crumpler. If you don't know John Crumpler, he writes for the Texans Wire, and he did a disservice to Steelers fans because this man upset Steven Nelson for no reason. Literally just stat pulled from NFL Next Gen Stats. Steven Nelson got so upset and said that he's throwing a slight to him and his man coverage skills. So I say that to say this. Steven Nelson, I think I don't know what's up with him. I don't know what was in his Wheaties that day on Twitter. He was going after him. Legacy game for Steven Nelson. Aaron Glenn game. 2002 Steelers. We're getting 2 pick sixes from Steven Nelson. We're calling it here. We are calling it right now. Legacy game from Steven Nelson. I do think it's a close game in all reality. I think it's a close game. The defense for both teams, I want to see how good of a defense is ours stacked against the defense, to the Steelers defense. I always like seeing, okay, who's better? You know, how far are we away from someone like the Steelers? That's how I always like looking at it. I'm going to predict a dub because I'm a Texans fan. You know, we don't predict many losses unless it's the Ravens week 1, I guess. But we're going to predict a dub here. I'm going 2013. Actually, I'll go 2017. Make it a little bit closer than that. I definitely Bleav it's not going to – I just think it's going to be an ugly win. That's what it feels like to me. I feel like this is going to be an ugly win, but we got to put out for JJ Watt. This is JJ Watt day. All right. TJ Watt might think he has something up his sleeve, and damn it, he might have 4 sacks in the game because we don't got no tackle to block him whatsoever. But with all that disgustingness going on our offensive line, I do definitely Bleav we can still somehow salvage this dub, go 2-2. And going 500 in the first quarter, as you say, that's pretty good for all the cards stacked up against us.
I'm going to go 17-14 Texans. I do agree this game is going to be very close. It's going to come down to which offense makes the crucial mistake. You are in front of JJ Watt. You are wearing the battle red helmets and uniform. The energy is going to be at an all-time high. I'm trusting my quarterback. I am trusting number 7. And if the Texans go 2-2, the conversations you can have after are insane because does this team get playoff ready when everyone's healthy? I don't know. But Mr. Mark, thank you for joining us on Bleav in Texans. Make sure you guys check out Mr. Mark on Bleav in Steelers podcast. He also has former Steelers cornerback Ike Taylor. Hey, how is that, dude? How is he?
He's the best. And tomorrow morning, we're going to be on with John McClain, a longtime writer from the Houston Chronicle.
The general.
Covered the team for 47 years. So we're excited to talk to him tomorrow. But Ike is my guy. He's a busy man. He travels quite a bit too. It's an absolute privilege to talk to him each week. And I learn something new every single time we host our show. But fellas, thank you so much for having me on. And if I find myself in Houston, Texas, we'll have to meet at El Tiempo, enjoy some fajitas together.
We're going to hit up El Tiempo, and then we're going to go to Washington to all the clubs there, have a very good time. Thank
Sounds
you
wonderful.
guys so much for being a part of tonight's episode.